Um, okay, so we're going to just be super informal tonight, and I'm going to go through, I'm going to show you my slides here in a minute that I used at the meeting at school the other night. If you have any questions throughout any of this, please stop me because it's a lot, especially if this is your first college kid. I say this over and over again, but why would you know any of this? Like, it's not your job. And so it will become what feels like a job to know all of this, but it's something that you are learning. And so I really just want to encourage you, like I did everybody else, and I hope that you can tell from the tone of my emails, like if you ever have any questions, please ask me, and don't feel like, oh, I don't want to ask her one more time or bother her. Like, bother me, please, because this is really, even for me, like I'm still figuring this out with my own kids. I have 2 in college next year, and it could kill us. I'm not looking forward to my bank account next year. So anyway, please make sure you ask me any questions, or if you don't want to ask a question tonight, feel free to email me or stop by, drop in. I'm happy to talk to you anytime. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. I can figure it out. Well, let's see. Oh, here we go. Okay. Okay, here we go. All right, so this is for this class. Eric Farmer is usually here with me. He couldn't make it tonight. He also moonlights as a DJ, so I think he's doing people's proms right now. But he is our area's representative for the Tennessee Higher Education Corporation and Tennessee Student Assistance Corporation, which are just branches of the Department of Education for the state of Tennessee. So he really is a huge resource to us for FAFSA questions, for anything that's like Tennessee Hope related, Tennessee Promise related. So if I can't answer a question, he's really my go-to. So if sometimes I will recommend that you give him a call instead of me, because I may just not be able to know something. So just know that that's a name that could pop up later. And he's a really awesome guy and a great resource. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about, y'all can see this, is cost of attendance. One of the many things that I emailed you, and if you don't have it all out, it's okay. It's going to be dumb if I hold it up because you're not going to be able to see it. But when you think about cost of attendance, there's a couple of things that you want to consider. A lot of lingo, and that's one of the things that I sent you with this financial aid lingo, because these are a lot of terms that just get thrown around real quick in conversations. And there's a ton of abbreviations that stand for stuff in there, and it gets real confusing, and things get they start to get muddy. So I just kind of gave you a glossary sheet to help you sort of navigate those terms so that you could feel like you're kind of in the know. When you hear presentations, that you guys go to preview days or tours, or even when you go to like admitted student days and orientation, when your kid gets ready to actually start college, if that's what they choose to do, then you'll kind of be familiar with some of this. But a cost of attendance is basically what it says. How much does it cost to attend your school? And then they kind of break it down for direct versus indirect costs. And so a direct cost is anything that the university is going to bill you for. So that's going to be tuition and fees. That's usually lumped together in one lump sum. And that's your tuition for your credit cost, but it's also your tech fee, your library fee, usually your student activity fee, all those little miscellaneous things. So they usually smush that together. And then whatever it costs for you to live on campus, if your student chooses to live in the dorm, and then your meal plan. So those 3 things are typically your direct costs. And that's what the university is going to say, you owe us this much money. But when you see cost of attendance on school websites, a lot of times it's going to include a few other categories. It's going to include miscellaneous expenses, travel expenses. Sometimes it includes like health insurance that the university offers for your student, and then books and supplies. So those are kind of classified as indirect costs because those are going to come up, but you are going to pay for those out of your pocket, or your kid's going to pay for those out of their pocket. And it's going to vary. So their books, the cost of their books is going to vary, and how much, if they go to school in Oregon, then your travel is going to be significantly higher than if they go to UTC. So that's just kind of the difference between those two expenses. So as you consider how much each individual university might cost your family, you have to consider those kinds of things, and it's going to be just kind of different for everybody. In-state versus out-of-state applies to public schools. Usually when you're thinking about tuition. So there's a tuition rate for the University of Tennessee, Knoxville for Tennessee residents. And if you live across the state line in Kentucky, then you pay a different amount. And then the same applies for us. So this is where, like, I had a conversation with a kid today, and they were telling me where they were wanting to go to school. And I was like, in my head, I just saw dollar sign, dollar sign, dollar sign. So I will be honest with you and tell you that the trend that seems to be going on right now is kids want to go to big SEC football fun schools, and that's a good time. I'm real careful to caution them to make sure they're not basing their school choice on 20 Saturdays out of 4 years for the 20 home games that will exist in their 4 years at that school. But, and to remember, there's going to be some really big lecture classes with 250 people in them. So I think they sometimes get caught up in some of the hype and the excitement and the game day fun. At the same time, there's really amazing opportunities at those big schools. There's great chances for research and cool things that professors are doing. And there's 1,001 student organizations they can be a part of. But they sometimes have to work a little bit harder to find their footing in a crowd of people. I only say that to say, like, I'm not dissing on big schools. My son is going to a bigger school. My daughter goes to a really tiny school. So whatever it is that works out for your kid is great. But those big schools out of state, like Alabama and Auburn and University of South Carolina and Kentucky, like, they cost a lot of money because they're a public school designed to serve those states' students, and we are having to pay the out-of-pocket costs out of state. So that's just something to be, thoughtful of and aware of. The difference between private and public, obviously, is who funds that school. Do private donors, or does the state usually kick in most of the money to run the school? But you will often find that this is where I really caution the kids to not run away from a private school, because the sticker price is high, because they know it's expensive. And so their scholarships that they give a kid for the exact same grades or talent or extracurriculars or test scores is often going to be way higher than what you're going to receive from a public school. And at the end of the day, honestly, a private school could wind up costing you less than an out-of-state public school, just because the out-of-state publics aren't really concerned about making it affordable for your kid to attend. That's not who their target audience is. So one of the sheets that I emailed you was this direct cost of attendance spreadsheet. And it has, like, I think I put about 30 schools, maybe, I don't know, on here that are kind of regional schools close to us, or ones that our kids typically tend to apply to historically, so that you can see. These are, I updated this in February, and I Googled, this is how I found all this information: COA LSU for cost of attendance, COA UAB, COA University of Memphis. I just Google that, and it usually, the very first result I get is the website for that particular school, where it breaks down their costs. And so I don't get it off a third-party website. Those aren't always up to date and accurate, but all these numbers came from the school's websites. Now, keep in mind, if room and board isn't listed separately, then it was listed as a combined cost. So, like, under UTK, it says room is $12,150. Well, that's room and board. That's room and a meal plan for a year. If you pull up this sheet later on, you will see that there are a few schools like the University of Alabama, Huntsville, Western Kentucky, Western Carolina, and North Carolina, and Georgia Southern those are 4 schools that offer in-state tuition to Tennessee residents, with some caveats. But there are schools that allow our kids to run away from home, as they are all begging to do, but don't necessarily make us hemorrhage money in the process. So they're out there. You just have to do a little bit of research and a little digging to find out who they are. So just want to kind of give you a heads up about some of those if your kid is just determined to leave Tennessee. So that's there.
Question. Can you hear me?
Okay, you have a question?
Yeah, Vanderbilt's not on there, just out of curiosity.
No, it's not. It probably didn't have enough space to fit all the numbers
Okay, yeah, not
on
that
it.
I'm
Okay, so,
going
but
there.
Dr. Parton, that's a great question. So here's the thing about Vanderbilt. If we all Googled them and I wasn't clunky enough and could get to another website in my presentation, then it would probably be about $84,000 to go to school there. But Vanderbilt's what's called a meets needs school. And a lot of the more selective institutions, like your Ivies and Vandy and Duke and stuff like that, what they do is they use your information from your FAFSA, which we're going to talk about in a minute. And that FAFSA calculates your need, which is not realistic, but it is what it is. And so if it costs $80,000 to go to Vandy, and they think your need is, they think from the FAFSA, it looks like you can pay $20,000, they will make up that $60,000 difference. So they meet the need, the 60,000 need that's in between what they're going to charge you versus what FAFSA says you can pay, and they make up the difference. So the kicker for those schools is not, can I afford it usually? So, I mean, $20,000 is still a lot of money. It's, can I even get in? And that is the challenge for those Ivy League schools and Vandy. And they're all usually private. There's not state schools that are going to be like that. But that's going to be the thing. Now, there's a lot of strategy in playing this meets need game. A lot of those schools have an early decision type of application, which means if you apply early decision, which is very different than early action, if you'll remember when we talked about that in February, it obligates you to go if you get in and you apply early decision. And a lot of times it's before they really have calculated all that financial aid mess. So you just have to be very, very, very cautious about that. But meets need, if you have a high achieving student and a low threshold of income, those are some really great schools to check out. So yes, you're right. I did not put Vandy on here. That's because no one ever gets it. So anyway. Okay, so that's kind of, but that's a great question. And there are schools out there that are less selective that do meets need, and that you can definitely check out. Okay, so FAFSA is making all of us not be able to sleep at night right now. So be thankful that you don't have a senior right now. It's terrible. And I have kids every day like about to lose their mind over it. But it stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. Everybody, almost 100% of everybody really should file this. And when you think about the FAFSA, I want you to remember it's your kids. All this stuff is your kids. You're playing a really big role, and I know that you're the one that's footing the bill for the most part, but all this stuff belongs to the kid. And as much as possible, and I say this from the standpoint of a mom who has a really uninterested son doing all this stuff this year, and I've kind of had to sit by him every time we've done something. Your kid needs to be driving this process and at least involved, because like some of the kids who are having problems with their FAFSA, I'm like, log on and let's see if we can do it. And they're like, I don't know how. Like, my parents didn't give me any of those passwords. I'm like, well, you need your own password. So anyway, when you do this, I really suggest you make them suffer through it and sit down and spend 30 minutes in torture doing this with you. It's the most boring thing ever. Like, it's not fun. But a lot of this college stuff isn't fun, but this is a means to an end. And I think it's good for them to see what's happening, because you have to file a FAFSA every year in anticipation of being in college the next year. So you'll file it 4 times. The only time you won't file it is when they're a senior. Typically it opens October 1st. This year it opened December 31st at midnight and has been a disaster ever since. So they did simplify it this year. And I will say that I was able to get on in early January and do it for both of my kids with them. And it was easier. It is easier than the previous FAFSA has been, but it has been a coding disaster. They've put wrong calculations in there. It's been a mess. But what it will do is it will take into account only your income. So this is where people get really angry with the FAFSA and complain, but there's nothing to be done about this. But it looks at your income and your assets. It does not include your retirement income or like your 401ks or your IRAs or anything. It excludes that. But if you've got a big old money market just floating around, that's something you'd have to include. And it doesn't include your primary home. But if you've got a cabin in the Smokies or a beach condo, then those are things that they're going to say, oh, that's an asset, and you could just sell it to send your kid to college. So it will include your income and your assets, and it will also include your students' income and assets. So there's a parent section of the FAFSA that has to be completed and a student section. And what they really do is you kind of create each of you create an ID that's tied to your social security number. So if you have somebody going to college next year and you've got another kid right behind them, you as the parent will use your FSA ID for FAFSA for both, the same one for both kids. You will not create a new one over and over again every time a kid goes to college because it's tied to your social security number and then theirs is tied to theirs. So typically this opens in the fall. As soon as you can do it, you will use the taxes that you should have filed by today, April 15th. You will use your 2023 taxes to do the FAFSA. So you always use the previous year's taxes and you will file the FAFSA in the current year for the future academic year, if that makes sense. So you'll use your 2023 taxes, you'll file it in the fall of 2024 for the 2025 academic school year. Does that make sense? So you're going to file it for the year that they're going to start college, which will be 2025, 2026. So that's kind of how it's a numbers mess. But one of the greatest gifts you can give your kids is to have your taxes ready to go. For families that have to extend, or who just don't do their taxes, it really puts their kids in a bind because you can't just, there's not a question on there that says, oh, your parents just not filed taxes this year. Okay, continue on. Like that's not an exception that will get them out of that. And the FAFSA is required in order to get any kind of federal aid, any kind of federal student loan, or any kind of aid from the state of Tennessee, including the Hope Scholarship, which we'll talk about in a minute. So it does not award, the FAFSA doesn't award you money, but it opens up all the doorways and pathways for all these other agencies and pots of money to come into play. So it is necessary. And some scholarships, like a lot of the scholarships that the Community Foundation holds and runs, and we'll mention that in a little bit too, they need your FAFSA information because some of them have an income threshold, and so they have to see that in order to see if you qualify to apply for that scholarship. So anyway, that's kind of something that'll be coming down the pike, but I send out, as you know, like I'm a talker and I'm a word person. So I send out a lot of emails with tons of resources and links to YouTube videos, links to webinars the organization that I mentioned, Eric Farmer, that he works for, TSAC, they do almost a webinar almost every Monday night during FAFSA season that goes line by line through the FAFSA to help you understand it. And they do these things in their sleep. They're so good at it. Eric will actually come to school and we will have a FAFSA night. So I had several families come this year and they brought all their tax stuff and we did the FAFSA while they were there. So I try to provide as many help items for you guys to complete this as you can, because it is important. And if you miss certain deadlines and wait till the last second to do it, then your kids do miss out on money sometimes. And it's a pain and it just drags out the agony of all this other stuff. So anyway, more to come on that. You may have questions about FAFSA. And keep in mind, it's a federal form. So if you're listening and you're a Georgia family, and I didn't ask that, This is the same for anybody in Tennessee, Hawaii, Michigan, Texas, Massachusetts. It doesn't matter. This is a federal form. And that's part of the problem this year, is because every single high school senior on the face of the United States has had to file it, and they've screwed it up for everybody, and trying to fix it has just been a mess. So hopefully 2024 got all the bugs and kinks worked out, and you guys will just sail right through it, and it'll be great. Okay, so scholarships. Kids are always asking about where they can find money. This is something, again, that takes effort on the part of the student, because mom and dad don't need to be filling out scholarship applications. But I think the hardest part of some of these conversations is that a scholarship is a reward for something. And to be brutally honest, sometimes the things that the GPA threshold or an ACT threshold or something like that just doesn't qualify kids to apply for some scholarships. And so that can be really disappointing and frustrating to a lot of families. And my kid is included in that. He's a good student. He did fine on his ACT, but he doesn't have numbers that are going to, like, where people are like banging down his door to like give him money and beg him to come to their school. So he's going to do great, and your kid will do great in college. I have no doubt that he's ready to go and he will be successful, but it's a numbers game a lot of the times. And, everybody got their ACT scores back from when we took it at school in March. And some of the kids did well, and some of those scores can be raised for sure. And we talked a little bit about in our February meeting about some of the scholarships and how they're ACT dependent, especially for state schools in Tennessee. So just keep that in mind. The next ACT date that you can register for is a test in June. There's also a test in July, and there will be tests in September, October, and December. And so those are all opportunities and chances for those scores to go up if you need that. But the best place to look for scholarship money is from the college itself. They are the ones that have the most money to give, and they're the ones that are most vested in you receiving some funding so that you can attend their school and they can get an enrollment number out of you. So it's really important to that's another great thing to Google. I Google stuff all the time. It's so much faster than wandering my way around somebody's website. But I just Google freshman scholarships at MTSU, and it takes me right to the page, and it tells me exactly what they need and what the ACT and GPA is and how much it is going to give me and all this kind of stuff. So you can always Google that. And everybody is different. UTK is the most expensive public school in the state of Tennessee and the most stingy with their money. So it is going to cost you the most to go there. They just don't give out a lot of money, and they don't have to, because everybody wants to come and they're willing to pay for it. Some schools, you have to have at least a 3.5 GPA in order to qualify for a scholarship. And then it goes up depending on your ACT score. Some schools automatically consider you for an academic merit scholarship, which is based on your GPA or your ACT. And some schools do not. It's a whole separate application. So it goes back to my fun answer of it depends, and it requires you and your student to do some research and know your schools. A lot of schools have deadlines for scholarship applications. Tennessee Tech, you have to submit their scholarship application by December 15th. So even if you have numbers that absolutely qualify you for money, if you don't submit your scholarship application, you don't automatically get it. UTK, you have to do the early action application, which is the application has to be in by November 1st in order to be eligible for that money. ETSU, their scholarship application is due March 1st, and they sent me an email today that says they're extending it to August 23rd, like probably, I guess, the day before classes start, which is awesome for our kids, because if they had like thrown in the towel on that ACT, if they were really like a point away from the next range of scholarships, they've got a June and July ACT that they could take after graduation that could give them a boost in their scholarship dollars. I think that ETSU did that this year probably because of this whole FAFSA mess. They're giving kids as many opportunities to come get some money as they can. So every school is different, and you just have to be watchful for that. Schools also have competitive scholarship applications that could be separate from the ones that are just based on numbers. And so a lot of times these come from departments or from endowment scholarships. And a lot of times their application is a one-stop thing. So there could be like 300 scholarships that they have available. Your kid doesn't have time to do 300 scholarship applications. That's insane. So they usually have a universal application, and then they use the information within that once your student submits it and shoves it off to the different scholarship committees that they're eligible for based on what you told them in that scholarship application. One of the other things that I put in that I sent to you was this financial aid websites. And you can see right here where it says scholarship search engines, and it's got listed about 6 of these. This QR code that's on there will take you, maybe y'all can scan that, I don't know. It will take you to this page, which has live links. So all this stuff is linked. So if you print it off the page, the QR code should still work and take you to where you can get on all these websites. But these are just search engines. They probably, most likely, for the most part, have all the same scholarships on them. There's not like, oh, I better make an account for all of these because I'm missing out on some. That's just not true. So your kid, I would say, pick 1 or 2. It really doesn't matter, eeny, meeny, miny, moe it if you want to. The only one that's real different is Raise Me, and that's something that as they do things, they kind of get points, and then they can use those points as a scholarship. But the rest of them, and there's more out here. By far, this is not an exhaustive list, but they create an account. They answer questions about themselves, about their demographics. Are they a first-generation college student? Are they left-handed? Was their mother born in Thailand? All these different things about them that make them who they are. And so, because there's crazy scholarships out there for all kinds of stuff, and this is how the search engines then spin their magic wheel and present to them a list of scholarships that they're eligible for. Some of them require essays, some of them don't. Some of them might require a video submission, some of them might ask for a letter of recommendation. There's all different things that play into those scholarships. But the one thing to remember about this is that, again, like the FAFSA, these are available to kids all across the country. And here's where you will hear the stories of, oh, well, my kid applied to all these scholarships and got their college totally funded. And they probably did, and spent every single weekend applying for these crazy scholarships. Because the thing of it is you don't know if there's going to be 10 kids applying for this scholarship or 1,500. Like, you have no way of knowing that. So it's a gamble. This is the last place I would look for money, is on these national search engines. We have lots of local scholarships. I've presented to the kids probably 50 or so this semester, and I put them in their SCORE account. I put them out there on my bulletin board. I send them to parents and students in emails. So they're out there. The Community Foundation of Greater Chattanooga holds a lot of them. They hold some money for a bunch. And so their director of scholarships, Stephanie Young, is a good friend of mine. And so she comes and does a scholarship presentation for the seniors right after Christmas. And so a lot of kids apply to them. I've got several, actually probably 3 or 4 kids interviewing for the Ronald McDonald Charity Scholarship Foundation this week. So I'm super excited for them. And we had 3 kids winning that last year. So there's definitely money within the local community. I have lots of kids whose parents' workplace offers scholarships. So I've done scholarships for TVA, for Shaw, for Komatsu. So that's definitely a place to check to see if your employer offers scholarships for their employees' children that they could apply for. All right. Any questions about scholarship money?
I have a question.
Okay.
Sorry. Hi. So how is like weighted GPA? Like I saw on the one that we got for the other seminar, that it was talking about like GPA plus the ACT for merit scholarships. Is it like an unweighted GPA? Does that matter? How
Well,
does that?
again, it depends, unfortunately. So like ETSU, and I keep coming back to them, we've got a lot of kids going there this year, which I think is cool. I love that school. They will take your weighted GPA. When I send schools transcripts, it has their weighted and their unweighted on it. So a lot of times, sometimes within the scholarship application, it asks and says, you know, which tells you which one that they want you to enter. But most of the time, it says it on their website. And if not, like if that's a question that you or your student has and it's not glaringly obvious when you're looking up stuff or in a brochure, that's something we can always call about and easy ask somebody there. So, but it really depends. And unfortunately, what happens with weighted GPAs is that is calculated differently from school to school. So the way Boyd Buchanan weights a GPA is different from the way East Hamilton weights a GPA, and it's different than the way Notre Dame weights it. And so a lot of schools do not take the weighted GPA because there is no consistency to that. And it makes it very difficult for it to be fair in the eyes of that institution, because every school gives weight in a different way, unfortunately. So that doesn't really help you a whole lot, but it is kind of a yucky answer. But that's a good question for sure.
I had a quick question.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't know. I'm trying to share my camera, but anyway, sorry.
I can see you.
Oh, great. The weighted GPA, is that, so I didn't go to school in the States, so I'm not familiar with how high school, I'm just learning my,
Yeah.
Anyway, so he mentioned to me something to do with honors classes. Is that right? Is that how
Yes.
it's different from the average or normal GPA?
Yep,
How-
you're exactly right. And so when they get a grade, so if they get an A for a semester for a class, they get 4 points on their GPA. If they get a B, they get 3 points. If they get a C, they get 2, so on like that. And so your GPA changes after every semester because we do semester final grades. We don't do like a cumulative year-long final grade, there's good and bad in that. But anyway, that's what we do. And so if he's in an honors class and he gets a B, so if he's in honors chemistry and he gets a B for fall semester, then instead of getting a 3 added to his figured in his GPA, he gets a 3.5. So you get an extra half of a point for an honors class. Let's say he's in AP chemistry, he gets a B, he'll actually get a 4 points. So you get a whole extra point for an AP class and half of a point for an honors class. And that's how,
Okay.
and then you divide that by the number of total, you add all those up and divide it by the number of total credits you have. And that's how you figure your GPA.
So if you said some schools don't take the weighted GPA because most or several schools do it differently.
Right.
If the student is taking 3 or 4 honors classes, they just take half a point for each class off to
Right.
to
So
have
it's
the
a
regular.
standard. So he'll have his traditional GPA on his transcript, and that will be just, if he got a B, he gets 3 points. If he got an A, he gets 4 points. And every class will be calculated without extra value points added. Then there will be a separate number, and it will indicate, it says weighted GPA. And that's when any honors or AP classes, they'll run the whole GPA all over again, and those extra points will go on to that one. Also on the transcript, it will be denoted line by line. So if he took honors chemistry, there will be an H next to that chemistry class, or there will be an AP. So even if a school doesn't calculate in the weighted GPA and they don't take it, they're still able to see the rigor of that coursework and see, oh, look, I know I can't take this GPA, but I am seeing that this kid has kicked it up a notch in their coursework. And so they can see the difficulty in classes, even if they can't reward them for that with their weighted GPA. So it does still, it's denoted kind of two different ways on your transcript so that they can sort of understand what your kid's been taking. So everything, all classes from freshman through junior year will be all taken with a normal and you'll get a typical normal GPA, and then everything will be recalculated and you'll have a weighted GPA. So the weighted will always be higher than your normal one, unless a kid has taken no honors or no AP classes, because that was the best thing for them. So that's okay. And then those GPAs will be the same because there's no extra value that's been added in. Does that make sense a little bit?
Yes, and I just wanted to ask real quick. I thought I heard you say that Notre Dame takes into consideration the last semester grades, the last quarter grades only to do the final grade.
You get a final grade at the end of every semester. So even though a class lasts there for the whole year, so for chemistry, I'm just picking on Miss Paula's class, you get a fall chemistry grade and you get a spring chemistry grade. So you don't get, oh, for chemistry, I wound up at the end of the year with an A. That's not, we don't do a final grade. We do a final semester of semester 1 and a final semester 2 grade. So that's just how their GPA changes at the end of every semester because we've given new final grades to be calculated. And so the GPA that they will use to apply to college in the fall will be the GPA that they end with next month when their junior grades are over. That's the GPA that they'll apply with. Yeah. If you have any other questions, let me know. Anybody else have anything they want to ask about that? That was good. All right. Okay, so let's talk about this. This is probably the one thing that I get the most questions on because some brilliant person decided to name all these things the same thing and they all sound the same, but they're all totally different, but they're not different enough to make it obvious and it's just real pain. Okay, so I also put this sheet in here, understanding the differences. If you open it on your computer, it's real pretty and it's in different shades of blue, but this one is gray. But I kind of gave you a real overview on Tennessee Promise, Tennessee Hope, and then other promises. But we're going to talk about this a little bit. So Tennessee Hope, the top one, that does not have one single financial requirement to it. So you can be the kid of a billionaire or the kid of the person living under the bridge. It does not matter. It is only an academic requirement in order to receive the Tennessee Hope. So you have to be a Tennessee resident, graduate from a Tennessee high school. You have to do both those things. So Georgia kids are not eligible for this if they live in Georgia. And then you have to graduate. So this is where a lot of kids get all hung up. They're like, oh, just my junior grades. So my senior year grades don't matter. But this is big time where they do. You have to graduate with a 3.0 unweighted GPA, and they do not take a 2.99. It has to be a 3.0 or a 21 on your ACT. And that's a one-time score. That's not a super score where you've like pieced together 3 ACTs and come out with a 21 super score. Now you could have taken the ACT 3 times, and if it took your 3rd time to get to your 21, that's totally fine. Nobody cares. It just has to be a 21 on one test, but it just has to be one of those. So if you've got a great GPA, but this test is kicking your tail and you can't get to that 21 for whatever reason, your 3.4 GPA or whatever is going to get you the Hope, and vice versa. If you have just not had some good classes and your GPA is sort of tanking, but for some reason you can knock that test out, you can take and you get a 25 on your ACT, but you have a 2.8 GPA, then you can use the ACT and you qualify for Hope. You just have to meet one of those qualifiers. And I go in at the end of the year after graduation and after grades are finalized, and I filled all that out for the state. They don't even make it available to me till like the middle of May. And I submit that. I submit everybody's final GPA and everyone's highest ACT score at that point in the year. And that is a lot of times what gives everybody eligibility or not for Hope. You can use the Tennessee Hope at any college in the state of Tennessee. So for Vanderbilt, you can use it. You can use it at Lee, which is a private school. You can use it at UTK. You can use it at the University of Memphis. You can use it at Belmont. It does not matter. You can use it at any school in Tennessee, and you get $4,500 a year for your first 2 years. So for freshman and sophomore year. And then as long as you have maintained your Hope eligibility, so you can't, like your grades can't, I think you have to keep a 2.85 GPA so you don't lose your Hope. Your junior and senior year, you actually get $5,700 a year. So it goes up by quite a bit. So it's a lot of money, and it makes it harder to walk away from a Tennessee school because you can't take this money and go to the University of Alabama with it. Like, it does not cross state lines. So it is only applicable if you choose to go to school in the state of Tennessee. So that one has an academic qualify for it. You can also use it if you decide to go to community college. So if your kid wants to go to Chat State or Cleveland State, or if they've got their favorite aunt lives in Knoxville and they want to go to Pellissippi State and live in her basement, that's fine. You can use it at a community college. You just get less money because community college costs less. So you don't get the full $4,500. So that's what Hope is. The Tennessee Promise is different in that there is no academic qualifier for this, and there is no financial qualifier for this. Every single kid in the graduating class is eligible for the Tennessee Promise, again, if they live in Tennessee and they go to a Tennessee school. But this is specifically designed for 2-year schools. So for your community colleges or the programs at a community college that's called TCAT, and that stands for Tennessee College of Applied Technology. And that's where you would go to get your license to be a plumber, or to be an electrician, or to be a diesel mechanic, or to be a sonogram technician. So you can go, the TCAT area of a community college has certificate and trade programs, and what they call the credit side of a community college has where you can go to get your associate's degree. So maybe you get your associate's degree in business and you do that for 2 years, and then you run over to UTC and you finish and you get your bachelor's degree. But what the Tennessee Promise does is it comes in on the back end of all the other money that you've gotten to go to a community college. So if you qualify for a grant from the federal government because of your income, if you qualify for your Hope, let's say community college, I'm just making numbers, cost you $3,000. And let's say you got $1,000 from the federal government and $1,000 from the state of Tennessee. So you had $1,000 left to owe. First, this is a simple math problem. It's not real life. Then the Tennessee Promise would come trotting in there and be like, oh, you owe $1,000? I got it. I'll pay for it. I paid your tuition. If you owe $5 at the end of the day, Tennessee Promise comes in and pays $5. So the Tennessee Promise is not a dollar amount, it's a last dollar amount. So after everything else has been used to pay for your community college, and if there is a remaining balance on your tuition, the Tennessee Promise will cover it. And that's how it allows our students in Tennessee to go to school at a community college for free for 2 years. So they can get, everybody, if they want to do it that way, can get their associate's degree for no cost other than buying your books and your parking pass. So it's a really great thing to utilize. If your kid is ho-hum about college and you're like, hey, I'm not real jazzed about spending $20,000 a year, and you could seemingly care less about doing this. If they are really money conscious and they're like, I don't want you to spend any money, let me do this, and then maybe you pay for the last 2 years of my bachelor's degree. Who knows what kind of deals is right for you guys to work out with your own family. That is never any of my business, and I will never ask. But there are lots of reasons that kids use the Tennessee Promise. The third thing on this little thing is other promises. Because the colleges came along and were like, oh, this is a fantastic idea, but I'm a 4-year school and the Tennessee Promise doesn't apply to me. So I'm just going to make my own promise. So now there's the UT promise, there's the ETSU promise, there's the Tech promise. So all these individual four-year schools who do not take Tennessee Promise have their own version. So let's say that your kid wants to go to ETSU and they get some money for Hope, they get a little money from a federal grant because you qualified with your income, and there's still $2,000 left for the tuition at ETSU. Well, now the ETSU promise will come in and pay that $2,000 that remains. The thing to remember about four-year promises and the Tennessee promise, it only pays tuition. So if your kid was wanting to go to ETSU and that ETSU promise came in and zeroed out that tuition because of whatever other things you had gotten, it does not touch room and meal plans. You are still on the hook for that. If you got so much money from a federal grant and from the Tennessee Hope that you had plenty to cover your tuition plus a little bit left to start dipping into your dorm, then the ETSU promise is not a thing. It will not go into effect for you because the promise only pays so that tuition gets zeroed out. So that's a tricky thing that a lot of people get confused on. So that's just something I want to point out. But everybody is seeming to come up with their own version. I haven't seen one from MTSU yet, but ETSU, Tennessee Tech, all the UT schools, and the applications for that are also different. So I make every single kid apply for this Tennessee Promise that's on the screen. Every single one of them. The deadline to apply is November 1st, and I hunt them down, I chase them down. They will apply for it by the deadline. I take care of that. After that, it's up to them. I will encourage them to stay eligible for it because it's so easy to get that money. And what I tell them is a lot of kids don't want to go to Chat State. Like they're like, I don't want to go there. That's not my plan. And I'm like, oh, well, have you ever heard of a thing called COVID? That was also not our plan. And it kind of turned our world upside down. So what I would like for you to do is remember that we don't know necessarily what's coming down the pike always. And we could have this grand plan to go to this four-year school and something happens. You get sick, a parent gets sick, a parent loses their job and doesn't have the money to pay for that fun four-year school anymore. Lots of things are out of our control. And staying eligible for the Tennessee Promise, in my mind, is just being wise. Like it's like having a safety net. For those kids who choose to use it, to choose to go to community college, that is an amazing plan for them. And that will never be a less than plan in my mind than going to a four-year school. It's the absolute right decision for a lot of kids. And for the kids who plan to go to four-year school, it's the absolute right thing to keep in your hip pocket in case there becomes a need, because it's so easy to stay eligible for it. You have to submit that application by November 1st. You have to either go to a mandatory meeting in the winter or watch a webinar like in your sleep. And then if you really, really, really wind up thinking that you're going to use it for the fall, then you have to turn in 8 hours of community service by July 1st. That is doable in 2 days at the food bank. So easy peasy things to stay eligible. Kids complain about that stuff a little bit, but I'm like, your trade-off is you get 2 years of free college. So I'm pretty sure that a meeting and 8 hours of community service is not a bad deal. So let's move on. So anyway, I will again make sure that you have all that information. I will talk to them about this till I'm blue in the face about it, but just want to let you know kind of those are some things. Those are terms that I get the most questions on because it really is confusing, and the term and the words are very same, but they all act in a very different manner. So they may have a question about that. That's one thing. Please always email me if you do, because this is also something that parents get really confused on. And these are things where misinformation I have found is spread a lot. And somebody's like, oh no, I'm pretty sure she said it works for this. They're like, no, my kid tells me it works for this. And then then it just all kind of goes downhill from there. So always feel free to like say, hey, can I clarify something with you? And I will go over that a million times just so that make sure that you understand. Because it does get messy and confusing for kids and for parents. Did anybody have any questions about that?
Not
I
about that.
have a quick question. Oh,
I'm
sorry,
sorry.
Cliff, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Are you sure?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, so for clarification, the application which you helped them complete, and thank you for that, that's awesome, is due by November 1st, but the FAFSA it starts in December or January?
Well, it started this year in December 31st. Typically it opens October 1st. And that's when
October
we're gonna
1st,
hope,
okay.
yes, we're gonna hope they get themselves together. They fire all the people who screwed all this stuff up and hire new competent people to run their program. And I'm a little salty about this. And then it opens October 1st like it normally does. But
Okay.
for the Tennessee Promise, the FAFSA element of that, you have to file it, like that deadline is usually March 15th. You have to file the FAFSA by March 15th. So, but those are all things that we'll talk about. Like this year, they bumped it all the way out to May 15th because it was such a mess. So we'll just see what they come up with for next year. But I will be responsible. I will take them to UTC as soon as we get to school for a tour, and we apply to UTC for free that day while we're sitting on their campus. And I will make sure that they apply to Tennessee Promise. And then I will make myself available to apply to whatever else. But those are the two things that I really, really make sure that I kind of help check y'all's boxes for, is to at least make sure that they have started to be eligible for a 4-year school and a 2-year school. And then after that, if they want to throw all those in the river, that's fine. And they're only concerned about schools in Oklahoma, like all good. But at least I feel like that's a great way for me to partner with y'all and to give confidence to these kids. One of the reasons we go to UTC is because at the end of the day, there's a big chunk of kids that are going to go there. It's a fantastic school. And so I'm really excited for the kids who do choose it, because there's so much good stuff going on over there. But it gives them confidence to go ahead and have an application under their belt early on. UTC's application is pretty easy and straightforward, and it helps them like kind of wade into this very new waters of college applications. And once they get that one done, they're like, oh, hey, that wasn't terrible. I didn't die. And maybe I can, do some more here and there. So we'll definitely do those two. All right, Dr. Pardon, did you have a question?
Oh, it's just trivia. I was wondering, these are annual numbers on the direct cost of attendance, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And they'll probably do nothing but go up.
What's that?
They'll probably do nothing but go up,
Yeah,
because
right.
tuition, usually pretty standard to have a 1% at least tuition increase at most schools every year. Sometimes it's 2. It's terrible to get that letter in the mail, but that's just kind of the way that it is. And different dorms cost different money. If you're living in the brand new dorm and you've got your own room and you don't want a roommate, which they're hilarious about. I will say I will have zero empathy with your kids when they start talking and whining about dorms. Like, I lived in a cracker box that was cinder block and with a roommate that I did not know. So they will survive. I had one kid last year say that they could only consider a school that was within 2 hours of home. And I was like, okay. I said, that's fine. Or you just feel like you're going to really want to come home and see your family? You want to stay close to them? That makes sense. They're like, no, I just need to come home and do my laundry. And I said, well, that like all the dorms provide washing machines, and usually you don't even have to like scrounge around for quarters like I did. Like, it's just, you just swipe your card and it pays for it. And they're like, oh, well, I'm not doing my laundry in a machine that other people have used. So I'm like, oh my gosh, get out of my office. So anyway, I laugh at them when they start getting all picky on me, but it's a big deal to them. So just be prepared. Okay, let's see what else. Okay, loans, Brody, but in full transparency, my kids are both taking loans next year. I told y'all I have 2 kids in college next year. We are 2 professional, full-time working people, and they will have to take it for at least next year. I'm hoping that's the only year, because my oldest will graduate, and then I will be back to only having 1 kid in college, and I think I'll maybe survive then. It's not the greatest thing, but it's also like not the worst thing in the world, as long as you're very thoughtful and wise and go into it with eyes wide open. You know, when we were in school, we could borrow as much money as we wanted to. And that is not the case now. And that's why kids cannot put themselves through college anymore. I don't care if you are working 40 hours a week at Taco Bell as an assistant manager and you max out the amount of money you can borrow. Like you can't, a kid cannot, it's very, very difficult for them to pay their own college. It just really is. And for a lot of kids, if that's kind of the way that family has worked that out, then that's when Chattanooga State and Community College kick in big time, because that sometimes is their only financial path. And it can still be a really, really good one. I just really want y'all to hear that. Like that can be still a really great plan. But the thing about student loans is it's capped. A student can only borrow $5,500 in their name as a freshman through the federal government. And that loan comes through doing the FAFSA. So if you skip the FAFSA, then there will be no loan available to you. And so that is only in the student's name. It is not in your name at all. And they are responsible for that money. You cannot file bankruptcy on student loans. They do not care if you graduate making $50 million like you dreamed that you would, or if you drop out of school after 2 years. It does not matter. That money will be due and it will be owed. So that's just something that they really need to understand. And it could be like, you're like, hey, I just can't do it now. I'll help you pay back this loan. Again, whatever y'all want to work out, it's fine. But that will be in their name only. The FAFSA also provides a way for parents to take out what's called Parent Plus loans if you need that. And if you qualify for it based on your income and as the FAFSA determines and all their magic and mystery. So those are available to you. And then I also put on this financial aid website, I put private loans. So Sallie Mae and Discover, those are just two. There's a billion of them. Your bank probably has a student loan, Regions, all that kind of stuff. There's a bunch of them out there. A lot of times those interest rates are just going to be a lot higher if you borrow from a private institution as opposed to borrowing from the government. So, but you will, when they apply to college, they have access to every school they apply to for a student portal. And they have to access that with a little password and all that jazz. But their ability to take the loan, if they decide they need it for the school they're going to enroll in, will be in that student portal. And you have to accept it. So don't think that you're accidentally going to be given a loan. Like you have to go through several steps to accept that money. It's not you won't accidentally do it. The thing to keep in mind about loans, let's say that y'all have your talk and you get down and you're like, hey, we can do this. You've got to kick in this. I got this from grandma. We're $1,000 short. Nobody has any clue where we're coming up with that that last $1,000. And you're like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to have to take a loan. And I guess I'll take my $5,500 loan. Well, don't take $1,000. Don't take all the money. Just like when we get approved for a mortgage, that doesn't necessarily mean that's what the house we need to buy. So even though the kids will be approved for a $5,500 loan, if they don't need it all, they don't have to take it all. You can modify that loan when you go in your student portal to take it and just take what you need. And then the next year, maybe you don't need anything. And then the next year, maybe you need a little bit. So every year it's going to come up and you can do something different, no-go or whatever every year. And there will be two different amounts in there. There will be a subsidized amount and an unsubsidized amount. And it's important that you take all the subsidized money you can first if you need it, because the government will pay the interest on that loan while the student is in school. If you have to take money from the unsubsidized portion of that $5,500, that's also fine, but interest will immediately start accruing. So if you don't have to take the whole thing, just take the subsidized part first, because that'll save you a little bit of money, or the kid a little bit of money in the long run. All right, questions about loans? Student debt became the number one debt. Several years ago, it exceeded credit card debt, and that's why there's a cap on kids on what they can borrow now. And it does go up. When they're a sophomore, they can borrow $6,500. And as a junior and a senior, they can borrow $7,500. So it does go up a little bit in an effort to hopefully keep them in school and get them across that stage. But you do have to start paying it back 6 months after you have to start those repayments, either 6 months after you graduate or 6 months after you withdraw from school, whenever you stop being a full-time student, 6 months after that, those repayment plans begin. And I tell them, you may be hearing whisperings of student loan forgiveness and all that. That's like a one-time thing that may or may not work out. That is never, ever, ever something I would count on whatsoever. So do not go in thinking that that's going to be something that's going to apply to you.
Mrs. Paris, I have a question.
Yes.
Is there a cap on the federal Parent Plus loans? I know you talked about private loans, which I'm
Yeah.
sure there's no cap on, but the federal loans, is there a cap on those?
That's a great question. You have to be eligible for them to begin with. So sometimes people aren't even eligible for them if their income is too high. But I actually don't know the answer to that. That's a great question. That's something I can look up. And when I send out this recording to everybody, I'll see if I have an answer for you. For some
Thanks so
reason,
much.
$20,000 is hitting my brain, but I honestly have no idea on that.
Thank
I'll
you so
tell you-
much.
Oh yeah, you're welcome. I'm on some insane Facebook pages that are filled with the meanest people in the world. But I do learn a lot on there. If y'all ever want to get on Paying for College 101, don't ever comment, because someone will tear you to shreds and pieces, and you'll wonder how some of these people sleep at night. But there is interesting information on there from time to time, and I do learn things. But they talk about parent loans a lot on there. So grants and work study. A grant is money that does not have to be repaid. Usually it is income dependent. So lower income kiddos usually are more eligible for grants. Honestly, the hardest kid to send to college is your middle class kid, average student, because they're not qualifying for a zillion academic scholarships, and parents don't have thousands and thousands of dollars just sitting around being unused. And so sometimes that average middle class American kid is the one who struggles the most to be able to figure out how to go. So, but also something that can kick in when you do your FAFSA is a work study opportunity. That's also income dependent. This is very different from just having like an on-campus job in the ice cream parlor. This means that your family's income has qualified you for work study, which means that the university has to guarantee you 10, 12 hours a week at an on-campus job that works with your schedule. And then they pay you at their whatever $9.50 an hour rate. And you can either have all of that money designated to go toward your tuition and your bills at school, or you can have that money deposited into your checking account and you can use it to buy concert tickets. So, the kids got to be a little bit responsible for that kind of stuff if they do work study, but that is an option. And the grants out there, like if you're eligible for the federal Pell Grant, because of your income, this year the maximum amount you could get with a federal Pell Grant is $7,395. And then a lot of times, if you're eligible for a federal grant, the state of Tennessee also gives you a grant for $2,000. So, and again, that's money that doesn't have to be repaid. So it just really, you have to kind of wait and see how all that shakes out with your FAFSA to see if you're eligible for any of those pockets of money. So, okay, so big thing, y'all have, hey, and I don't know if Ms. Bacher is on this, but I just want to note that I've not cried once yet in this presentation. And I got a little teary the other night when we were in person. So maybe Zoom is the way for me to go. But this is something that is really important to my heart, because every single year I have a kid in April come into my office sobbing because their family has said they can't pay for school. And it's not because something terrible or tragic or unexpected has really happened, but it's because they didn't talk about it. and they didn't look at any of those websites and they just did all these applications and they're like, oh, look, I got a $20,000 scholarship. I'm so excited. But if the school costs $60,000, then that $20,000 scholarship, yes, is fantastic, but you still owe 40. So is there $40,000 to pay? Like, you still constantly have to look at that bottom line. You've really got to keep your eye on that and not at all these other cute little amounts that are coming in. You have to look at that bottom line. And this is where I think it's really important that we, to the point that it's appropriate and comfortable, are honest with your kids about, like, hey, this is our family. This is not the family next door. This is not the family of the kid that you're dating. This is not your best friend's family. This is our family, and this is what we can do. And we love you, and we want the best things for you. And we think you're going to be amazing at any school you go to, because you are you, and you will determine your college experience, not the school. But this is where we're at financially, and this is what we can do. And you just need to be thoughtful about that. And just, kind of go in eyes wide open with all this and just really talk about it. I had a kid one year who was so excited when I was at the STEM school, and he had gotten into a school he had really been excited about. But the entire time, every time they had gone on and looked at the money on the website, that particular school broke their cost down by semester, and they did not notice that. So they saw that money as a yearly cost. And when the light bulb came on and they really dug down and they multiplied it by 2, it became completely undoable. And that kid there was no way in 1,000 years he could go to that school, and he was devastated because of just something like that. And that's another thing to be aware of. Every school does it differently. And so when you look at cost of attendance on a school's website, you have got to pay attention to whether is this a semester cost or is this an annual cost? Because they just do it differently for whatever reason. So you just have to be really thoughtful about that. At the same time, when you say, hey, we need to talk about college tonight, tell them we're talking about for 20 minutes. I swear, set that timer on your phone. And when it goes off, you're out of there. Because if you extend that out to an hour, they will never sit down at that table again with you. So stick to it. Don't talk about it every day. Say, hey, I even give and he hates talking about this stuff. So I usually give him like 2 days advance notice. I'm like, hey, Wednesday night, I need you to come straight home from practice. Don't go do anything else, because we need to sit down and go through some stuff. And as long as I give him kind of a heads up, and I don't run my mouth a lot, which is hard for me, and I keep it to a minimum, then he's good. But he does not want to sit here and do this for 2 hours. Like, he would rather pull his fingernails off. Like I said, he's a great kid. He's a great student, but this is not exciting. This part of it is not exciting to him. He just wants to get there and go, and then he'll be fine. So really be thoughtful about making those meetings, with your kids, just really positive, and try not to be too fussy, and then say, okay, that's enough. We're done talking about this. I made brownies earlier. Let's go watch Survivor. I don't know, whatever it does that your kid likes to do where they're not in a bad mood, do that with them. And so you just have to you want to be real protective of that relationship next year, because it's going to be stressed and it's going to be tested, and you're both going to be up to your ears with the other person's, attitude and fun little words. But do the things that you can to kind of preserve those relationships. Okay. All right. Some of this stuff is already passed. This was from my last slide. We had a couple of college fairs last week. I hope some of your kids went to them. There was a ton of colleges there. Probably preview days for the most part are over, because colleges are wrapping stuff up. My daughter's last day of class is next Tuesday, and she's out of there. So colleges end way sooner than we do at high school. But you can always do a tour. You just set that up through the admissions or campus visit. And there's some summer programs going on. And then I will offer a Camp College in August. So this is free to your kids. They may not want to come. And I get that because it's going to be before school starts and they may not want to set foot on this campus one single second before they have to. But we will go over filling out the Common App together. We'll go over starting our essays. If they're going to write one, we'll go over letters of recommendation. We'll go over just application basics and everything. So we'll do a lot of stuff that'll kind of help them get a head start. So just be looking for information for that. And so we'll do that just a couple of days before school starts. Nobody wants to be messing with this junk in July, and I would like to be on vacation with my family. So, but we will do some things to kind of get them prepped, and I will spend a ton of time with them, more than they ever want to see me next year. But keep talking to them, keep thinking about them. The only thing really, people have asked me what they can do this summer. They can work, make some money. They can relax and sleep late. They can not think about school for a little bit and hang out with their friends. They can maybe volunteer somewhere. That would be good. But they can be working on an essay if they think that they will need an essay for their application. The Common App essay prompts have been put out for next year. They're probably the exact same they've been for the past 3 years. I haven't even honestly looked at them yet. But if that's something that they just really want to work on, then thinking of a good essay that does not include anything about a divorce, about someone dying, about a disease, about a disability, like those D words have really been done. And colleges would love to not read. Please don't write about your injury as you were sliding into home plate that ended your college dreams of playing baseball. Like, nobody wants to hear about any torn ACLs, not because it's not important and didn't affect your kid in major ways, but it's been done 18 billion times and they're tired of reading them. So coming in from some fun little weird wonky angle with something that's just a little bit different and out of the box, but that still makes sense and that still shows I can write cohesive thoughts and correct grammar and tell you something about myself, even though I think I'm plain Jane all day long. There is something about the way you see the world. There's something about the way you relate to certain people that's different about you. Every kid has some really neat story to tell about themselves. Sometimes it takes a little bit of thinking for them to do that. So that's my one summer suggestion if they really want to, other than researching colleges, if they want to spend some time this summer on. And then again, this is my information. Please make sure you're on Remind. That this is how you subscribe to it. So the number that you're going to send a text to is 81010, and your message just says @NDHS25. So that way you will get all kinds of information from me about, schools are coming here to visit today. Hey, this is due. Here's the link for this, blah, blah. You'll be seeing the same thing. This is the same thread I use for the kids. So I try real hard to keep you guys looped in. I hate it when I do not know what's going on with my kids. Like, I hate it. And so I may tell you more things than you ever care about knowing, but that is what that's about. So, all right. You may have any questions or anything? No?
I think so.
Okay.
I want to thank you for doing this. I appreciate it so much.
Oh, you're so welcome. Oh, I see something in the chat. I wasn't even looking at that. Oh, thank you. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to stop the recording and I will send this out to everyone.